So I was pretty excited about the response that I got to last week's message. Remember, we were talking about the difference between the good life and the high life. And we talked about the illusions created by marketing and the way that marketing kind of plays on our ego and our desire to move up in the world. And we remembered how God, as we know God in Jesus, is actually a God of downward mobility. A God of downward mobility. And so let's see where this week takes us and see if it leads us also in some interesting directions. So I invite you to pray with me for a moment. God, for everything that you've done for us and for all the good things that you pour into our lives every day, we give you just profound thanks and gratitude. And I thank you for everybody who's in the sanctuary here this morning, for their lives, for their families. And I pray that together we might hear a word that you would speak to us. And I pray that you would speak that word, whether through me or in spite of me, but that you would speak and make yourself heard this morning. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So I have to admit something. I am completely fascinated by the self-storage industry. So I was talking last week about some shows that I DVR every week. And no, Storage Wars is not among them. I promise you that. But I just find this concept really interesting, that we rent space to store stuff that we might need, but we clearly don't need it so much that we need to have it anywhere really close by. That seems a little odd to me. Self-storage is this really American kind of phenomenon. So of the roughly 60,000 storage facilities worldwide, about 81% or so are in the United States. And there are actually... Now, you're going to find this hard to believe. I found it hard to believe, too. But it comes from the industry trade group. 2.35 billion square feet of storage space in America. 2.35 billion rentable square feet in America. Now, that sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. Let me tell you how much it is actually. 3.6 times the size of Manhattan Island. Okay? So take Manhattan 3.6 times. It's enough space that you could take every man, woman, and child in America and you could put them in it. Seriously. Each person would have about 7 square feet, which is not an uncomfortable little room to stand in when you consider you've probably been at concerts where you've been packed more closely together than that. Unbelievable. So it's too bad for the hero, or maybe the anti-hero as the case may be. It's too bad that the anti-hero of Jesus' story didn't live in the United States in the year 2013, because it would be very easy for him just to go out and rent a storage locker, right? Be a lot easier. There's this old tradition in the history of the church of calling this story, this parable that Jesus tells to illustrate his point, of calling it the parable of the rich fool. A man has such a great harvest that he looks at his fields and he says, I have plenty. I have plenty to last me a long time, but the problem is I don't have any place to put it. So what will I do? And this is the part that I really don't get. I'll pull down my barns and I'll build bigger ones, right? What are you going to do with it in the meantime? That's what I always wonder. But anyway, I'm going to tear down my barns and I'm going to build bigger ones. And that's the way the story goes. This guy is constantly talking to himself. The whole conversation is in his own head. My harvest. My barns, my grain, my goods. He even talks to himself. He says self, right? And you begin to wonder, why is it that he is talking to himself like this? Is it that his friends have all already walked away from him because he's that annoying? Because, it gets tiresome to hear me, my, mine, I all the time. Isn't that what you tell your kids? Talk about yourself less. People will be more interested in you. And you know what I'm talking about. If some of you are on Facebook, there are probably some people that every time you read what they have to say on Facebook, you roll your eyes at them, right? You roll your eyes. And that's this guy. That's this guy. I don't know why it is that we sometimes find ourselves, and there's a word for this, hate reading the posts of some of our friends on Facebook. It's worth thinking about. Is it really because they are that obnoxious? That's a question. Is it really because they are that obnoxious? Or instead, is it because we envy them? Maybe it's true that we envy their stuff, whatever stuff it is that they're into, whatever it is that they're talking about, the latest and greatest thing that they did or went, someplace they went or something they bought on Facebook. But it's more likely, I think it's more likely than not, that we actually envy them two things that we perceive that they have that we don't. And this really kind of is the main point of the whole day. Freedom and security. I would say those two things are the things that we more likely than not envy them, that we perceive that they have that we do not have. What is it that we usually say when we're rolling our eyes? We're usually saying something like, must be nice, right? How many times have you said, must be nice, right? It's a pretty common way to approach it. I perceive that the two most important things that money symbolizes for most people, including myself, it represents freedom and it represents security. The ability to do what you want when you want. The ability to walk away from a job that you hate and go and do something else. The ability to travel, the ability to further your education if that's what you want. The ability to, buy a ranch in Montana if that's your dream. The ability to do all those things. And then to feel secure in the chasing of that thing that you dream about. Okay? And so that's the other thing. That's the security dimension of it. To be able to know that if something goes wrong, that if you get laid off, if you get sick, or if somebody in your family gets sick, if that restaurant that you dreamed of opening happens to be burned up in a fire, that you know that you have enough that you could start it all over again and you'd be all right. Knowing that. Now, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with any of those ideas, either one of those ideas. I would never tell you that you ought to give up saving for retirement. We all want and need to have a sense of security. We all want and need to have some kind of sense of freedom, of the ability to choose. And that's all, on some level, that the rich man in Jesus' story wants. He wants to be able to take it easy. He wants to be able to enjoy the fruits of his labor. But the end of the story, when he's in the midst of all these big plans, he hears a voice that says, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you." And then all those things that you've stored up for yourselves, whose will they be? There's one thing that money can buy, and that is it can buy you health insurance. But you know what? It can't buy you health. Take a look at Steve Jobs. We used some illustrations from Apple last week. Apple's co-founder and CEO that died in 2011. He had plenty of money to afford the best health care in the world, right? Plenty of money. He did the cancer treatment, he did the liver transplant, he did everything that was possible. He did it too late because he was too stubborn to believe that there was something wrong with him. But still, for everything that he had and all the money he had, he couldn't buy his way out of death, right? It just wasn't going to happen for him. So security is an illusion. It is true that I would much rather face a health challenge with money in the bank than without money. No question about it. But still, money can only buy you health care. It can't buy you health. And as for the other piece, freedom, I'm not 100% sure that freedom, the way that we perceive it, is all that it's cracked up to be either. Because while conventional wisdom says that we buy things, we own them, we acquire them, we possess them, the question is whether we possess them or whether it's the other way around. So let's take a look for a second at something that those of you who have ever had one of these, probably have never had the one in the background, but maybe the one in the foreground you know something about, right? You know that when we're talking about boats, I don't know if you really own them or if they really own you. So I remember when I was in middle school and my dad brought home this boat and he pulled into the driveway and he was so excited. He was pulling this boat. I had no idea he was going to buy a boat, right? We hadn't talked about anything like this. I don't even know if my mother knew he was going to buy a boat. I have to ask him about that, or ask her about that. But he pulled in, and this boat was wonderful. I mean, we went fishing, and we went water skiing, and we would go swimming, and we had a lot of fun on that boat. But here's the thing. On Sunday afternoons, when we took that boat out, I could never really fully enjoy it because I knew that on Monday in the afternoon, it was going to be my job to clean the boat. And it wasn't an easy thing to do. It was a lot of work to keep and take care of that boat. Now, I asked another friend recently, he has a boat at the shore, and I said, am I perceiving this properly? He said, absolutely. Keeping it clean, keeping it running, wondering what the next part is. We didn't even have to contend with salt water. We were just towing this thing from lake to lake. But a boat parked in salt water, that's a whole different thing. You never know when the next component is going to fail. And you never know how much it's going to cost to fix it, right? Something could go wrong at any time. And on top of that, my friend said, from the first day you buy a boat, you're always looking forward to your next bigger boat. Now, it's the same thing when you play guitar, right? You buy a guitar, and then you're always looking for, what's the next guitar, right? There's a joke I tell with my other guitarist friend. Every man who plays guitar has this one day when his wife says, one more comes in, one has to go out, right? Every man who plays guitar, anybody probably who plays any musical instrument, has that same thing happen. There's this notion in psychology of something called the hedonic treadmill. Hedonic as in hedonism, okay? The idea that the only thing that's really valuable in life is pleasure, okay? And so hedonists are all about that high life that we were talking about last week. But you don't have to be a hedonist to be on the hedonic treadmill. We're all on it. And that's what drives us to think about bigger boats and fancier homes and more expensive cars and more exotic vacations. The hedonic treadmill at its core, and if you look at it, it's very much like a chart that would show you that you might draw the same chart to represent an addiction, right? The amount of the drug that you took to get high last time is not going to cut it the next time around, right? Very similar kind of an idea here. So the thing that was enough to get us really jazzed last time, next time we experience it, it's just going to be, yeah, whatever. Same as it was last time. Which drives us to look at something more. That each experience of luxury just leads to a desire for more luxury. And so that brings me back to the other challenge that I laid before you last week. And I'm not going to ask for a show of hands, but I'm hoping that some of you took some time to read Ecclesiastes. Okay, Ecclesiastes, we're going to keep coming back to it over these next few weeks. And right here, I want to talk a little bit about chapter 5, because it speaks to this constant desire for more. So this is beginning with the chapter 5, verse 10. The money lover isn't satisfied with money. Neither is the lover of wealth satisfied with income. This too is pointless. When good things flow, so do those who consume them. But what do owners benefit from such goods, except to feast their eyes on them? Sweet is the worker's sleep, whether there's a lot or a little to eat. But the excess of the wealthy won't let them sleep. Andrew Carnegie is supposed to have said, put all your eggs in one basket and then watch that basket, right? That kind of idea, right? Worry about what you've got and whether it's on its way down or whether it's on its way up. I have seen a sickening tragedy under the sun. People hoard their wealth to their own detriment. Then that wealth is lost in a bad business venture, so that when they have children, they are left with nothing. Just as they came from their mother's womb naked, naked they will return, ending up just like they started. All their hard work produces nothing, nothing they can take with them. This too is a sickening tragedy. They must pass on just as they arrived. What then do they gain from working so hard for wind? So if you remember last week, the passage that we read was talking about vanity, vanity, all is vanity. And this is a little bit different translation. It talks about pointlessness or meaninglessness, that all this stuff that we pursue, and this is a phrase that keeps coming up in Ecclesiastes, is just a chasing after wind. The idea is exactly the same. That our desire for stuff is about illusion, it's about ego. It's about the hedonic treadmill. It's about the idea that on a treadmill, you cannot get ahead. So you know that t-shirt that says, "He who dies with the most toys wins"? I'm not sure. So Lisa, who's our church secretary, she pointed out to me, she was talking about a sermon that she'd heard recently where the preacher was talking about, he who dies with the most toys nonetheless is still dead, right? Something like that. Well, here I found a guy who figured out a way to put both of these ideas together. He put the message, "He who dies with the most toys wins," on his tombstone. That's pretty sad, isn't it? So why do we keep chasing after wind? I read this story. It was about a stage act that was done quite some time ago, back in the 30s, in Austria before the Nazis came to power. And it was a clown, okay? And if you can picture a darkened stage, and this clown comes out into the single spotlight in the center of the stage, and the clown, part of his act is he's frantically searching for something in that light. He doesn't know what he's looking for. Nobody knows what he's looking for, but he's just looking for something. A police officer comes onto the stage, walks across. "Can I help you with something?" "Yes, I cannot find my keys. I don't know how I'm going to get into my house without my keys." Cop says, "Okay, I'll help you." So they both, down on their knees, looking. It's clear there's nothing there. The cop stands up and says, "Are you sure you lost your keys here?" The clown says, "No, I lost my keys over there." The cop says, "What are you doing looking right here in this circle? You lost them over there." Clown says, "But this is where the light is." Isn't that exactly what we do with money? We look for security, we look for freedom, we look for happiness in it, because in our society, this is where the light shines. Right? The light shines on this little circle. And in it you can draw just big dollar signs. Everything about our society shines that light on money as the solution to all of our problems. But if that were really true, then how can you explain the fact that, when you do a long-term study of people who've won major lotteries, fundamentally, once the initial excitement about this big windfall wears off, they're really no happier than they were when they started. Or how would you explain the fact that when you look at people's happiness across different nations, the United States is number one in terms of all the economic measures, but we're like number 12 in terms of where the happiest people in the world live? From the story of the rich fool, we ought to learn this lesson. First, that there is no freedom, that there is no security, that there is no happiness apart from the one who gave us this life to begin with. And that's what Jesus means when he's telling this story and the voice comes to the man who wants to build the barns saying, "This very night your life will be demanded of you." The language that's used here is exactly the same as that of a banker calling in a loan. This very night your life will be demanded of you. Right? Tonight payment is due. And that's what it's really about. This idea that everything that we have, everything that we are, it's really on loan. It doesn't belong to us. It never did. It never will. Even our lives are borrowed from the one who gave them to us to begin with. Borrowed. Now, we can look for the meaning of life in the stuff that we surround ourselves with. We can look for the meaning of life in bigger barns and bigger bank accounts. We can look for the meaning of life on the treadmill. We look there because the light is shining there, right? And because it's easy. It's easy. That's where we've been told we ought to look. But what we learn here in this place is that there is another light, the one true light. What does the Gospel of John say? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him, not one thing came into being. What came into being in him was life, and that life was the light of all people. Where is it that we're looking? Which light and whose light are we looking for security and happiness and freedom in? Are we looking into the light of the world, or are we looking into the light of the world? Amen.